The 90s were a golden age of weird and wonderful genre television. Packed with swords, monsters, and questionable CGI, 90s fantasy shows were equal parts ambitious, cheesy, and unforgettable. Some became cult classics, while others quietly vanished into the ether. But that doesn't mean they should be forgotten. In this third part of our Forgotten Fantasy Shows series, we're taking a nostalgia-fueled trip through 12 underrated fantasy shows from the 1990s. You might remember a few, but chances are there are some hidden gems just waiting to be rediscovered. Forever Night. In the long, moody lineage of brooding vampires with a conscience, Forever Night quietly set the standard. This Canadian cult classic follows Nick Knight, an 800-year-old vampire seeking redemption by working the night shift as a homicide detective in Toronto. With only his confidant, medical examiner Natalie Lambert, aware of his true nature, Nick walks a tightrope between his dark past and his desire to become human again. Forever Night was a gothic, noir-tinged procedural that was surprisingly ahead of its time, paving the way for the vampire boom that followed. So if you're a fan of morally conflicted anti-heroes, this drama with a bite definitely deserves to rise from the pulp culture crypt. Highlander, the series. Before immortals were brooding heartthrobs, Highlander the series gave us centuries-old warriors locked in epic sword battles across time. Serving as an alternate sequel to the 1986 cult classic, this 90s fantasy staple follows Duncan MacLeod, a 400-year-old immortal navigating modern life while battling others of his kind in duels where decapitation is the only path to victory. Unlike Connor MacLeod from the movies, Duncan brought a new level of broody charm and killer ponytail to the franchise. The show leaned into its mythology with epic sword fights and flashbacks spanning centuries. Equal parts action, drama, and philosophy, Highlander delivered camp, heart, and just enough existential dread to make immortality feel like both a gift and a curse. Ocean Girl. Take one mysterious girl, a futuristic underwater research colony, and a whole lot of ocean secrets, and you've got Ocean Girl, a sci-fi fantasy that made waves in the 90s. This Australian series centers on Neri, a girl with a special connection to the ocean, who lives alone on a remote island and communicates with whales. Her world collides with two brothers from an underwater research facility called Orca, and soon they're caught up in a web of environmental threats, shadowy organizations, and secrets that stretch beyond Earth. Ocean Girl balanced eco-conscious fantasy and coming-of-age themes with a surprisingly grounded heart, and it still holds up as a unique, under-the-radar gem. Spellbinder. Now here's a show that lives in the you-had-to-be-there category. This show takes us on a journey with Paul Reynolds, a Sydney high school kid who finds himself in a parallel world where the Industrial Revolution never happened. While searching for a way home, Paul teams up with Rihanna, a native of this strange world, and together they solve science fantasy puzzles and dodge power-hungry techno-wizards known as Spellbinders. This series didn't look or feel like anything else on TV at the time. The kids were smart and science was magic. So even though Spellbinder only ran for one season, it burned itself into the brain of anyone who stumbled across it on TV. Hercules, The Legendary Journeys. Greek myths got a glow-up thanks to Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, a show that wasn't afraid to mix epic battles with B-movie charm. The series follows the adventures of Hercules as he battles classic monsters, evil warlords, sassy demigods, and the occasional time traveler. With his loyal sidekick Aeolus by his side, Hercules seeks to protect the innocent and atone for past sins, all while delivering gloriously campy humor and ridiculous slow-motion fight scenes. It's part sword and sandal epic, part Saturday afternoon cheese fest, and 100% 90s fantasy comfort food. So if you're in the mood for a fantasy with a shirtless action hero who saves the day by chucking a bad guy into a haystack 30 feet away, Hercules is your show. Or check out the prequel series Young Hercules to see a teenage Ryan Gosling. Yes, that Ryan Gosling, playing a younger version of the legendary warrior. Xena, Warrior Princess. Hercules wasn't just a simple mid-90s epic, it spawned an entire mini-universe, most famously launching the ultimate scene stealer, Xena Warrior Princess. Originally introduced as a one-off villain, Xena was so fierce that she scored her own series almost immediately, and then completely outshined the origin show. Xena took everything fun about Hercules and gave it a sharper edge, deeper stories, and a compelling focus on a warrior seeking redemption. Accompanied by her companion Gabrielle, Xena traverses ancient worlds, confronting gods, monsters, and her own dark past. The series broke ground with its strong female leads and bold storytelling. It was fearless, and fans loved it for that. Xena wasn't just a hit, it became, and still is, a pop culture icon. Kindred, the Embraced. Next up, we have Kindred, the Embraced, the tragically short-lived vampire show with major potential. Loosely based on the Vampire the Masquerade role-playing game, it follows Frank Kohanek, a San Francisco cop who discovers that the city is secretly ruled by vampire clans while investigating the alleged mobster Julian Luna. In truth, Julian is the prince of the city, the ruler of the 5 warring vampire factions, who struggles to maintain peace and keep the vampire world hidden from humanity. In just 8 episodes, the show built a rich world of intrigue that fans still obsess over today. The vibe was moody, the fashion was leather-heavy, and the stakes, pun very much intended, were high. The Adventures of Sinbad. Set sail on the high seas with The Adventures of Sinbad, a Canadian series that reimagines the legendary sailor's exploits. This version of Sinbad is a roguish hero with great hair, a loyal crew, and a knack for getting into magical mayhem. In each episode, Sinbad and his crew sail into a new port, run into some ancient evil, and fight their way out with swords, spells, and a lot of slow-motion jumping. The show has the same kind of energy as Hercules and Xena, with its campy, fun, ancient meets fantasy setting and delightfully over-the-top villains. And while the visual effects may not have aged all that gracefully, Sinbad definitely scratches that 90s fantasy itch. The Legend of William Tell. You might have heard the story of the guy with the crossbow and the apple, but the Legend of William Tell took that legend and turned it into a surprisingly bold take on the classic folk hero. This New Zealand-produced series focuses on the titular hero as he leads a ragtag group of rebels against the tyrannical ruler Zax and the dark sorcerer Creel. Combining medieval adventure with fantasy elements, the show sees William on a quest to restore young Princess Vara to her rightful place on the throne and bring peace to the kingdom of Kayla. And while The Legend of William Tell only lasted 1 season, it had big fantasy energy with its ambitious world building and a banging theme song that still hits. Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog. Now, let's talk about Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog, the surprisingly awesome show that looked like Power Rangers raided a Celtic mythology textbook and decided to go full fantasy mode. Set in a mythical version of ancient Ireland, the show followed a group of young warriors chosen to wield elemental powers and magical armor in defense of the kingdom of Kells from the evil Queen Maeve. It had all the classic 90s cheese ingredients, Monster of the Week battles, mystical artifacts, and dramatic speeches about teamwork. Sure, the acting might be a little wooden, and the monster costumes sometimes look like leftovers from a Halloween sale, but Mystic Knights was pure fun, and therefore carved out a unique place in fantasy TV history. Ultraviolet. Ultraviolet isn't your typical vampire show, and that's exactly what made it so cool. This slick British miniseries treated vampirism not as folklore, but as a scientific phenomenon. The story follows Detective Mike Caulfield, who stumbles into a shadowy government vampire hunting unit after his best friend disappears and reappears with a thirst for blood and a sunlight problem. Mike quickly gets pulled into an underground war against a race of vampiric creatures known as Code Fives, all while struggling to balance his personal life with his new job. With only 6 episodes, the series burned bright and fast, but it left a lasting impression as one of the smartest vampire thrillers of the 90s, and definitely deserved more attention than it got. Honorable mentions. Before we get to our final entry, let's give a quick shout out to some honorable mentions. Shows that didn't quite make the main lineup, but still brought their own strange flavor to 90s fantasy TV. There's Neverwhere, Neil Gaiman's gritty underground fairy tale, Teen Angel, where a teen's best friend dies from eating a bad burger and comes back as his guardian angel, and The Crow Stairway to Heaven, which continued the cult film's dark revenge saga on the small screen. Then we had Big Wolf on Campus, the supernatural high school comedy you probably didn't know you needed, as well as Good vs. Evil, a strange but stylish show about undead agents battling evil in a retro noir version of Los Angeles. Each one had its own quirky charm and proved just how weird and wonderful 90s fantasy TV could get. The Lost World. And last but definitely not least, we have this mix of Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, and 90s syndicated fantasy TV weirdness. Loosely based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's classic novel, the story kicks off with Professor Challenger leading a ragtag group of explorers on an expedition to prove the existence of a lost world. But instead of just discovering ancient fossils, they stumble into a land full of dangers. Carnivorous dinosaurs, vicious Neanderthals, a race of lizard men, you name it, it's there. Luckily, the adventurers meet Veronica, a jungle-savvy woman who helps them navigate their wild new circumstances. The Lost World ran for 3 seasons and built a pretty dedicated fan base. And no wonder. It might not have had blockbuster effects, but it definitely brought that 90s adventure magic to life. Do you agree with our picks for these forgotten 90s fantasy shows? Are there any series you'd like to add to this list? Let us know in the comments. Check out the first 2 parts of this video on our channel, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.